very much. Please. So we started with Sébastien with fact-checking, which, as I said, was a little bit out of fashion today. We finished with Pierre, who called us for being kind of realistic and reasonable, which is also a little bit out of fashion. But I think maybe not in this room, so that's good. So it's time for me to open up for questions, please. Yes. No, wait for the mic, Stan.
Stan Cozon, Capgemini. Question to Mr. Bach. You mentioned at the end of your presentation that one of your suggestions was that WTO countries should try and reach agreements on certain common issues. Let me pick the first one you mentioned, climate change. What would be the 2 or 3 or 4 major countries you think could drive this effort?
Can I?
Yes, please.
Well, climate change issues are becoming a universal issue. But if you look at this morning, we have also discussion. We have big leading nations having different positions on climate change issues. The EU is really advocating for climate change issues by introducing carbon border adjustment mechanism or pricing the carbon, things like that. But US is not doing it. So maybe we have to have some kind of common, at least common principles or agreement to make so that many other countries can participate in this kind of movement. So we can extend this idea for food security and public health, but after that, I don't have any good idea what will be the 4th or 5th item, but maybe human rights or labor standard, we can talk about this. In US policy on IRA, through IRA, they talk about the origin of the country, who is making it, what kind of material you are using it. Rather than that, we have to impose some kind of climate change criteria or human right criteria. Then you don't have to designate any specific persons. That's what I was saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So I see one here. Other questions? Okay.
Sorry, very big question to you, sir. You mentioned...
Can you introduce yourself,
Farid
please?
Yassine. I used to be ambassador to France. A good friend of Thierry's, that's why I'm here. Question on the parallel economy. What's the impact, or has anybody looked at the impact of the emergence of Bitcoin on the unregulated economy worldwide? Thank you.
So who wants to discuss Bitcoin? Sébastien.
I'm not sure I heard all the entirely the question, but to me the question with the Bitcoin is to what extent it will play an active role in the present transformation of the monetary system, in particular in a context where financial sanctions have been spreading. My feeling is that so far they have been playing a role that remains marginal, rather marginal. It might increase, but I don't think in the near future it will play a major role. What I would add is that I don't think the objective of many governments in that respect is to replace the dollar in the monetary system. I think the objective for them is just to limit vulnerability to financial sanctions, which is a pretty different thing, and which does not require replacing the dollar. And I think it's much more pragmatic and reachable objective.
Thank you. Are there questions? Yes, please, thank you. And there are two, yeah. We take this one, and there is one on the front row afterward.
Thank you, Nicolas Pio from Tilt Capital. I was just wondering whether we are considering China with today's eyes, and going forward, we're not looking at also the weaknesses. For example, in my sector, energy, none of the PV producers are actually cash generating. Same thing for EV producers apart from BYD. So do you think that they will remain this sort of super manufacturing superpower by definition, or can they be mishaps?
Pierre or Sébastien?
Yeah, perhaps quickly, I think what we have been witnessing for a few years has been a major bias in Chinese policies in favor of supply in general and the manufacturing sector in particular. What we know and we have been witnessing for a long time is that this is not inconsistent with a very strong, very harsh competition within China. So I think and it's typical actually of the way the Chinese leaders are organizing industrial policies. I mean, favoring the sector, but also favoring competition within the sector. So to me, that's part of the process, and I see no contradiction, and I see no reason why that would weaken the general position of the Chinese sector as a whole.
Suzuki-san?
Right. Well, I fully agree with Sébastien. I think no country is perfect, and China is neither. I think China has a lot of problems on the food, energy, supplies, and these are, of course, the weakness. But at the same time, their fierce competition, internal competition, is making Chinese products very competitive externally, but their internal framework of the economic competition and the market is more fragile and fragmented. So there are this is also very interesting that most of the cases it is the government-led competition. So the government provides the incentive for the private sectors to compete and to gain the access to the subsidies and tax credits, and then they are competing each other, and then at the end of the day, either to the big guy remains like BYD or in some other cases, and there are all players die together, like in case of the share bike or many other consumer products. So I think Chinese economy is very dynamic, but also it is very extreme in a way. So there are lots of weaknesses in China, and that's not any contradiction with the manufacturing superpower.
Thank you. Yes, Pierre.
Yeah, I just wanted to use this opportunity to say that this has lessons for Europe. And I think that we cannot predict what will happen in China, but certainly the message for Europe is very clear. We should invest more in research and innovation, and much more than we do. And indeed, that also implies public investment and European cooperation. We are not taking that road. What we are discussing nowadays is to constrain the capacity of the governments to intervene, for good or bad reasons. But we need to find ways to combine the need to put our public finance in order with the need which is now to invest dramatically in research and innovation.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Stephen Erlanger from the New York Times. And I wanted to press a bit further on de-dollarization and about defending oneself from American sanctions, because that's what we're mostly talking about, right? I mean, you seem very calm about it. I question that. I mean, I see Iran and China maneuvering around Russian sanctions to buy Russian oil. People are maneuvering around Iran sanctions. The Chinese have been talking, a lot of people have been talking, the Europeans have been talking about defending themselves against American sanctions. On the JCPOA, they failed. They tried to set up their own exchange mechanism and failed. So I'm curious why you seem so calm about it, and don't you see other factors at work, particularly with Trump coming in? Thank you.
Well, maybe one of the reasons that there is no American in the panel, so that's maybe why we are so calm. Thank you very much for your question. I think you want to answer. Who wants to react to?
Yeah.
Yes.
No,
yes,
go ahead.
Vladislav and then,
Okay. Yeah, I agree that actually the trend is present, and all these countries affected by sanctions, and all those of them who are threatened by sanctions, they are actively working on this. I would not say that it's possible to expect something as a new currency to be invented, which can challenge the dollar. But it's more about the settlements. It's more about the new system of settlements, some undercovered, some official, which can be used in quite huge numbers, in quite huge amounts for evading sanctions and for organizing an alternative kind of money or quasi-money transaction. It might be bitcoins, might be crypto, might be Hawala schemes, whatsoever. But anyway, the system is on the rise, and I think that it will be somehow, I would say, manifested itself in 5 to 10 years.
Right. Somebody
Right.
wants, yes. Yes, please.
Yes, as I formerly, I was a former member of the panel of experts on the sanctions on Iran at the United Nations. So I was looking at how Iran tried to circumvent the dollar scheme, but eventually the Iranian the currency market is basically a demand and supply, and if there is no demand for the Iranian currency, the real, then it is not on the commodity. It's not on the market. Yes, the renminbi is probably the most powerful among all these non-American or non-dollar currencies, but the renminbi is still under the government control. So it is not, the demand and supply is not met. The Russian ruble, Indian rupees are neither of the global currency. So there is nothing can replace dollar at this moment. The cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, are potentially can be used as a circumvention, but the value of the Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency is so fragile and it's so fluctuated, it's not being very attractive as the currency. It can be attractive as an investment, like gold or diamonds, but it's a commodity rather than the currency. So from those point of view, I think even though there are willingness of going into a de-dollarization, I think there is nobody can be able to to replace the US dollar.
Anybody wants to? Okay. Yes.
Tania Sologoup, Crédit Agricole, French bank. Especially maybe Vladislav, don't you believe that the circumvention of sanctions are also creating new roads? Because globalization is also a story of roads, and especially multimodal roads coming from Central Asia to Turkey, and creating a very intense traffic now. And do you believe that it may be also, not now, it's not a comparison, but a game changer, even for China, trying to escape from the Malacca trap through new roads?
Vladislav.
Yeah, no, I don't think so, because actually, look, the problem with evading sanctions is, I would say, it consists of two parts. One is evading direct sanctions, for example, semiconductors, gold, some other strategic commodities, dual-use products and whatsoever. And this amount of goods is, I would say, quite negligible in size. So for supplying the Russian defense or military industry by semiconductors, you should have 2-3 containers per year. It's quite enough. So therefore, I would say that the evasion of sanctions by itself will not create these new routes, but definitely those goods which are not formally sanctioned, for example, the personal computers, smartphones, they are not sanctioned. The companies, they say that we are not operating in Russia anymore. So therefore, the official flows which went from Europe to Russia in previous days are substituted by the semi-official flows which go to Armenia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkey, and many other countries. So in this case, yes, maybe, but it's not a sanction evasion. It's kind of, I would like to say, better to say, optimization. The sanction evasion per se is very sophisticated and small size process. It will not create another trade routes.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, I have a question for all of you. I quoted in my introductory remark Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, who said in AI, this is a soccer match between the US and China, and the referee cannot win. And I would add, is there still a referee in this match? Would like to react. Sébastien.
Yeah, perhaps I can start. I think so, somehow, at least if I understand well, your question reminds us of the importance of third parties and middle powers, to call them as Thierry did in his introduction. And I think it's really central for many issues. And we see this with sanctions, for instance. If you want to impose efficient sanctions, you cannot do it alone, except in very exceptional cases. Dollar, to some extent, is one of these cases. But we see that, for instance, in top-end semiconductors, even the US need allies. And if you don't have allies, at least you need support or consistent behavior from partners. So we are increasingly in a multipolar world, and I think it's defining increasingly the way the world economy behaves. And perhaps that's a silver lining in what to expect with the new Trump administration. Perhaps Trump is better prepared than, to his objectives than he was 8 years ago. But I think as well that many of the countries around the world are also perhaps prepared better to play a role, and a positive role, to build up the resilience of the economics, the international economic system. So my reply is not specific to AI and more general, but to what extent does it apply to AI? I'm not sure, but
yeah.
Well, if I want to pursue this analogy with referees and so on, I would say that, first of all, we are not in a game between A and B, because there are C, Ds, E, F, G, H around taking part in the game. And second, there are many referees, in fact. And one of the characteristics of the world we are in is the need for joint action. Joint action, by definition, is not a game between one country and another. It is a dynamics in which everyone needs to take part. And being a referee could be actually deciding not to take part. And that is something that would be very damaging for a number of issues that are very relevant in today's world economy. So I think the analogy has limits, that indeed politics is back, and that goes in the sense of things the referee doesn't matter. But since we are entering a multipolar world, there are many ways in which all the actors, including the referees, will have their say.
Thank you. I think we'll let the discussion on AI go on the tech panel to see whether AI is really changing anything or not to our conversation. Yes, Jean-Claude. And this will be the last question, I think, given the time. No, wait for the microphone for the translation.
JC Grufa, New York. I have a question for the panel. I'm not sure who wants to pick it up, but we talk about currency, we talk about trade, and so on and so forth. So currencies are a way to settle trade. But at the same time, currencies are also an instrument of reserve. So when we talk about using one currency versus another, we have to think about the fact that if you trade, you get some currencies, you create a balance, and the question is, where do you want this balance to be kept?
Yeah.
The issue of convertibility, the issue of liquidity, to me are very, very prominent. And in that sense, one of the superiority of the dollar, in my opinion, is the fact that although it is under the control of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, at least this is, unless the US decide to use, as they've done in some situation, I'm thinking a very large European French bank, as a matter of fact, had to pay $9 billion for trying to bypass sanctions. And they forget the fact that every trade in US dollar settled at 8 o'clock New York Times every day. So it goes to the US. You can't avoid that.
Thank you. Having been CFO of two large banks which have not fined as much as the one you refer to, I know the feeling. Who wants to pick up that last question? Sébastien.
Just perhaps to comment that
Vladislav?
indeed there's a kind of contradiction between the very large imbalance and some frequently announced willingness of decoupling. As long as you have such imbalances, you are somehow linked through the settlement of these imbalances. And that's why so far interdependence remains, which does not mean that it is healthy or that it remains for good.
Thank you. Vladislav, you want to?
Yeah, I would add a little bit here, because before all the sanctions wars and before this restoration of the global confrontation, of course, the value of dollar and the euro was in the universal role in the global financial system, and everything which Sébastien said applied to these both currencies perfectly. But now, when these additional restrictions are in place, so I would say that a very sophisticated task is now facing many governments, because except of the natural virtues of the dollar or euro, they should reflect on many other obstacles, because, of course, yes, dollar and euro are the best possible reserve currencies, but some countries cannot afford them because they believe they are risky strictly for them. For these countries, for Iran, for North Korea, for Russia, whatsoever. So therefore, it would be a kind of, a huge, how to say, a huge list of options, from more favorable to less favorable. And therefore, the competition is a little bit, it is corrupted, because now, for example, renminbi, yuan, is now very, very necessary and very needed for Russia, because Russia can't afford operations in dollar. The gold is also may arise as a huge reserve asset, which was not the case 10 and 20 years ago. So something is changing because of these politically motivated elements of economic game.
Thank you very much. So I think it's time for me to try to reach temporary conclusions to this very interesting panel. I'm glad that the room actually was full, and I checked that not many people slept, so I think it was, we passed this test. So first conclusion, I think on whether we are facing de-globalization or re-globalization or anything else, I think the jury is still out. Second, in a world where there are competing narratives, I think word matters. The way we talk about things is extremely important. It was very interesting to see the way people handle the various conversations. It's true that when you talk about globalization, people think first about trade and finance, less so about people, data, etc. That might change over time. Third, we passed several tests, and thank you for bringing the cases. We passed some tests, we failed some tests, but there is more to come. So as you say, Vladislav, stay tuned. And don't jump too fast to conclusions. I mean, things go fast these days. I would say fourth, and thank you, Sébastien, fact check, even out of fashion, remain extremely important. I think it's necessary to be serious, not to kind of entertain the buzz and easy narratives. I think it's important. The interdependence and its duality, I think, is a critical word, and also the connection between things that were separate before, economics, domestic politics, international politics, geopolitics, climate, etc. They are more intertwined than ever, and they require a lot of time for decision maker wherever they are, and it's extremely difficult. I think, and that's my own observation, we also have to take into account the fact that even if the state is coming first when we discuss, I mean, we've discussed the role of international organizations, there are new actors. I mean, the big tech players are actors in themselves. The big NGOs are actors in themselves. So they also contribute to this changing globalization pattern. My regret, as I say in my introduction, is that we also should focus on what I call the planetarization. I think there are challenges to our planet and to our human species, and I think it's still not really in top of mind of people, and I think it's important to contribute to keep this in mind. And I heard everybody, so people say globalization as we knew it is over. The rules-based system is very challenged. We are moving to something which is more transactional, more contractual. The question is whether this transaction-based system or contract-based system will remain within a rules-based pattern or agreement or paradigm. And that's, for me, one of the challenges today. Can we together follow some generally accepted principles, or are we moving in a way or another to the law of the jungle? In conclusion, I think we have tried to be reasonable, to be realistic. It might be the biggest challenge to remain reasonable in today's world. The only realistic conclusion I can draw from all of this is that this topic is probably going to be on the agenda of many more world policy conferences because there's still a lot to come. So thank you very much to our panel. They deserve a warm round of applause.